Howdy all of you delicious people, I'm here today to view Pinocchio 2022. So this is to of course be another copy and paste attempt from another animated film, but not only that, we also have several different Pinocchio live action animated things over the years. And so this Pinocchio had to go on and really wow people, and I don't think it really delivered that. Simply because this was a movie that was going to get chucked onto Disney Plus, so it really didn't need to wow anybody. It just needed to be a thing for more Disney Plus content. And so this is just another copy and paste attempt from a other source material that people could have gone on and actually seen and knew what the story was already going to be. So when I would watch Beauty and the Beast, the live action compared to the animated movie, I would feel like there's a drastic difference there. There's a scale kind of difference and so on and so forth. Whereas this movie, it's we have the Monstro character that I guess was to be a whale in the animated movie, but it feels like they added bizarre tentacles and all these other goofy things to the whale in this movie. Am I seeing that incorrectly, or was that just me? I thought that was just so weird. How they try to make this a different kind of whale that I've never seen before, for some goofy reason. So, anyways, I was also laughing during half of the Pinocchio line delivery because I'm like, this voice is just so odd to have this be used in a 2022 film. How we're still going with this very high-pitched, goofy delivery that I just don't like anymore, but they're still going with that same old, and I'm like, no. That doesn't make sense to have apply to a movie like this anymore. But okay, alright. So, and then there are points in this movie where there is actually funny stuff, but most of the time I'm just laughing just for how goofy and odd this film is. Just because I don't remember much about the animated original source material, so I couldn't massively tell what the difference was. But here's also the thing. I would not go on and bring the target audience, which is a kid, into this kind of film. To me, there's a whole scene with the whole Pleasure Island thing where we have kids playing with fireworks and breaking a bunch of household items, and I'm like, why would I ever show a kid this film with supposedly the outcome of this being, when these kids were to do all these things, that they would become a donkey. And I'm like, if you go on and you have kids breaking household items and playing with fireworks, they're going to get more than just turning into a donkey. They may get arrested and thrown into jail. Especially if the household items or the fireworks are to be directed into a other person's home rather than your own, with the kid that you are trying to guide as a parent. So, for me, this movie fails on the one thing that it needs to do, which is give a kid a distraction, and I would not point this movie for a kid to watch to distract them, or to give them something to do upon a day. So yeah, to me, this movie is just a bad Pinocchio film because there have been others. This movie needed to wow me, and it failed on that. The one thing it needed to do, because this movie is clearly just Disney Plus content. It's nothing more than that. So it just fails because it doesn't really need to try. So, with that said, what is Pinocchio about? So, we go on in the main, focus thing, so I have something to say in spoilers. We have a guy named Geppetto who is to be this man who is to have a clock store where he doesn't sell clocks. And Geppetto is to turn around and make this puppet and wish at some point that it was to be real. And so this puppet does become real and turns around and all of a sudden is to be given some moral compass that is to basically be a grasshopper or a cricket in this story. So hence why his name is Jiminy Cricket. So we go on to have Pinocchio that tries to do things like a normal kid and is to be discriminated and kicked out of a place like school. So Pinocchio is to think, well, if I can't go on and do what a normal kid does, then I'm just going to go on and try to do other things to hope that this will make my dad happy. And instead, we have Pinocchio who goes on and does the wrong things because we consistently have his moral compass, who is to otherwise be held or just be away from Pinocchio for a long stretch of time. And so we have Geppetto that is to realize that he needs to find his Pinocchio, and that leads him to finally then go on and sell all of his clocks to bizarrely go out to sea for a reason I don't understand, to try and find his lost puppet. And so all the while Pinocchio is going on and continuing to go further and further into unsavory places to meet people that are doing wrong things that are also churning Pinocchio's stomach at certain points, to then have Pinocchio realize, man, I wish I could just be back home. I wish I could have my trusty sidekick right next to me. Because, I feel like these people would tell me the right thing to do here, or would guide me against being in this location, and to the point where Pinocchio himself is to realize, yeah, this is wrong, and I should try to figure out a way to get out of here to make my way back to my father, the only person that will accept me, and then save my father to then go on to have a happy ending by the end of this film. Very vague. I just kind of rushed through the whole explaining of that. But, the animated movie has been out for a number of years. There have been several other different Pinocchio films. I'm not thinking of any real drastic difference between anything that we haven't already seen before to what this new movie will provide. So yeah, it's just a sad day when I can just realize that this movie possibly for me was just something to see today. So anyways, because you gotta have that subscription use when you use it monthly. So with that said, let's double five this bad boy up. Let's get into spoilers, because it's about that time. Let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie. So in the very beginning of this film, we have the intro song for every Disney movie that is like, "Can you wish upon a star?" or "When you wish upon a star." Da, 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 da. Yeah. Um, they finally end up singing the words to that song within this movie because that's, of course, where the song came from, is this movie, and they finally dawned on them, yeah, maybe we should remake Pinocchio because we have nothing better to do. So Jiminy Cricket arrives in the beginning of this movie, and also the narrator is also Jiminy Cricket, telling Jiminy Cricket that he's going to be the narrator and he's going to be guiding people on where this movie is going. So Jiminy is talking to Jiminy and saying like, "Well, hey, am I ever going to go on and uh like find a place where I can get warm?" And Jiminy's like, "Well, just keep on walking." So Jiminy goes on and finds Geppetto's store, and he is to mention like what kind of odd jobs this guy all does, like odd assortments and all these kinds of things. So Jiminy makes his way squeakingly through this guy's door and then has to also squeak his way out of the door. So Jiminy makes his way into Geppetto's place to find Geppetto putting together this puppet that he, of course, is to figure out the name Pinocchio by this puppet being made out of pine. And so it's like, okay, like this thing is made out of wood. How about Pinocchio? That sounds great. So we have Geppetto that is thinking about his lost wife and his lost son, and hoping that at some point that this puppet will give him like will help him with his loneliness. As Geppetto is talking to his cat Figaro and his fish Cleo. So we have Geppetto that is taking the Pinocchio puppet and playing with it to then try and do something with Figaro, but Figaro continues to get scared of the puppet to where it keeps lurking more and more further back. The cat does, and is to feel like it's getting backed into a corner to where it feels like it needs to strike. Uh, because it does not like whatever this puppet is. So we have Geppetto that is to take this puppet and put it away for the night, and then kind of look out his window to realize that there is a shooting star that has arrived in the sky. So Geppetto is to go on and be like, I wish I may, I wish I might, and the first star that I see tonight, so on and so forth. So Geppetto, of course, is to wish for Pinocchio to become real. Instead of him just becoming a real boy, to avoid all the odd process of this kid looking like a puppet through 90 to 100% of this film. No, I just want a puppet that just looks real. Because, of course, you get like oddball looks, especially if you've ever seen uh, like a puppet that is out in public, or anytime you're to go on and see uh, certain films like Lars and the Real Girl, which I would not recommend a kid to see. So, but I'm just stating you'll get odd looks. So, we go on and have Geppetto that is to be wishing and then sleeps. So, come to find out, we have the Blue Fairy that arrives within this place to make Pinocchio a real puppet boy. So, Jiminy is to also seem to realize what is going on, especially after he is to put himself near this fire to get all warm, and then is to kind of douse his coat a little bit with flame. So Jiminy is now to be kind of like scared of what is going on, and then all of a sudden he then realizes that Pinocchio can walk, he can talk, and so all of a sudden we then have Blue Fairy who's like, well, hey, like, since Jiminy is to be the closest thing to a possible friend to Pinocchio, how about we go on and we have Jiminy Cricket just become Pinocchio's kind of moral compass, or have Jiminy try and guide Pinocchio into doing the right things, because Pinocchio doesn't have a moral compass. He doesn't have a sense of right or wrong yet. And so Jiminy's like, well, okay, like, as long as you give me some sweet duds, some sweet just umbrella and hat and coat, and then I'll definitely go on and I'll be this puppet's guide. So the Blue Fairy is to go on and give Jiminy some sweet, just sweet clothes, and then Jiminy is like, all right, like, this is great. So we have the Blue Fairy that is to sing her "When You Wish Upon a Star," da, 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 da. And I'm like, okay, like, so we've not only had like singing in this song, but then we've had people like weirdly just consistently rhyming in this movie, and I am just so like, okay, this movie's weird already. So, um, so the very next moment after Blue Fairy is to leave, Geppetto was freaked out because he was like, hey, wait a minute, like, somebody in my house? Is there a burglar? So Geppetto starts going through his place, and Geppetto is just start to like talk to Pinocchio, realizing he won't answer, and then all of a sudden Pinocchio does answer, and Geppetto's like, wait a minute, what? Huh? And then so Geppetto realizes that Pinocchio starts asking or answering Geppetto, and he's like, oh my god. So Geppetto is to realize that Pinocchio had been the cause of him getting up. And so Geppetto and Pinocchio just start dancing, and they're having a wonderful time. And so we have Pinocchio and Geppetto, who, of course, are to go through their days and have Pinocchio learn certain tasks. And then Geppetto's like, you know what I think, Pinocchio? I think it would be great if you would just go on and go to school, because I think you should start learning, like, and be a normal kid. So Pinocchio's like, well, that sounds great. So come to find out, the one day that Pinocchio is supposed to go to school, Jiminy is behind the eight ball of getting up and needing to run after Pinocchio. And so we get at one point where Geppetto, after letting Pinocchio go off to school, Geppetto is to give food for Sophia, who is to be just this pigeon or this bird. And when Jiminy runs out to try and chase after Pinocchio, he runs in this bird, and it's like, well, hey, could you help me out? Like, considering you're not going to eat me, how about you go on and, like, help me find where Pinocchio is? So Pinocchio, while making his journey to school, is all of a sudden stopped by a guy named Honest John and Gideon. And so Honest John is this CGI'd fox with this top hat and coat and whatever. And I'm like, okay, this is like, I just thought it would be a live action person that we would just put here, but I guess I would be wrong. because that's what the animated thing does. So why not just copy and paste from that? And then we goofily have Gideon, that is to just be this cat that looks just the same as the animated movie. So we have these two characters looking on at Pinocchio, and they're looking at a gold mine here, or a gold mine, because they're like, man, like a puppet that can talk and walk, like this is $1 million right here. So the two animals go on and grab this puppet and are trying to persuade this puppet to not go on to school, but instead to try and become famous and become a uh like a stage puppet. So Pinocchio is like, well, like Geppetto wanted me to go on to school and like I don't know about fame and this and that. So we have John consistently trying to go on and talk to Pinocchio and try and manipulate him into doing what he wants. But we then finally have Jiminy Cricket arrive, and have him fall on top of Honest John's hat. And so Jiminy is now telling Pinocchio, like, hey, like, don't go on and listen to these guys. Like, Honest John, like, if he has to have a name of Honest John, he's probably not really honest. And so, like, don't listen to these guys, listen to me, let's go to school, let's do the right thing. So, Pinocchio goes into the school, is like, with his goofy walk. So, Jiminy is to say that he can't go on with Pinocchio into the school because I don't think they'll allow bugs in the school. So, Jiminy is to just wait for Pinocchio to come back. And come to find out, he won't be waiting for very long. So, Pinocchio ends up getting booted from this school because he is not a real, in this person's eyes, boy. So, this teacher ends up booting this puppet because it's like, hey, like, join the circus, you freak, or whatever. So, I don't know what he really says, but it's something like that. So, we then have Honest John and Gideon who put a bottle to Jiminy, and they then grab Pinocchio, and it is to persuade him. It's like, well, hey, like, if you can't go to school, then why not, like, if you're a puppet anyways, why not be a puppet show? Or why not, like, and become famous? Like, if that's your only option, like, and your father will be proud. And Pinocchio's like, yeah, like, I guess since this is my only option, like, if I'm gonna get paid and whatever, like, yeah, sure, might as well. So, we have Honest John and Pinocchio going off to. So, we have Pinocchio who gets fed to Stromboli, who is to be this kind of thick, bearded man, who is to have uh, Fabiana, who is also to be this kind of ballet puppeteer that has Sabina. And so, like, they're putting on this massive puppet show. And so, we have Geppetto, who is to realize, like, well, hey, like, it's 5 o'clock. Like, why isn't Pinocchio returned to me? I should go to the school and see what's the matter. And so Geppetto goes to school, realizing that no one's at the school. And so Geppetto just continues to just go on this walk, desperately trying to find his wooden son. So, come to find out, we have Pinocchio that goes on to do this very first puppet show, where at first it looks like he was to have strings, and Pinocchio is like, well, you're not going to put strings on me, are you? And they're like, well, no, like, it's just an effect. So we have Pinocchio that goes on to do this show where he, of course, is to do the song, like, I have no strings to hold me down. That whole song has been used in two different movies. We of course have it being used in Marvel's Avengers: Age of Ultron, and we also have it bizarrely used in a Gerard Butler movie called Gamer, which would not be a movie that I would recommend for kids to see. It's a very hard rated R film, uh, but yeah, like we have Terry Crews that ends up doing that song in that movie uh, to weird out Gerard Butler's character in that film. So, but I have to go on and mention this stuff just because, like, it's the stuff is to be used elsewhere. So we go on. Excuse me. Uh, we go on to have Pinocchio who does this song, and then all of a sudden the music in the background is oddly speeding up, and so the puppets are trying to match the music. And it seems at one point we have Pinocchio whose legs go crazy and is to almost start a fire, to where Stromboli is to toss this thing of water to stop Pinocchio's legs from bursting into flame. So, because Pinocchio doesn't know any better, he'll just go faster and faster and faster until his legs just blow up. So, we have Pinocchio that after that whole performance is now over, we have Stromboli that's looking at Pinocchio. It's like, yeah, you're going to make me a lot of money. We're going to go to the next town and people are going to love you and so on and so forth, as well as we find out that Fabiana is to be a girl that has this odd leg injury that she is to also be performing these kind of ballet-like movements, as well as her puppet, who is also a ballerina. And so when Pinocchio is to at first see Fabiana, Fabiana just kind of pushes Pinocchio to really much more see Sabina, who is to be like a puppet to Pinocchio's puppet. So it's like, oh, okay, like this looks like a friendly person that I've met before, and so it seems that Pinocchio can be friends with this other puppet that he doesn't realize is to just be a person talking to him with strings. So Fabiana is to want to free Pinocchio at some point, because when we have Stromboli that is to notice both of these two playing around and wasting valuable time on a performance that they can use elsewhere, we have Stromboli that chucks Pinocchio into this cage. We have Fabiana that is trying to free Pinocchio, not having Pinocchio realize that this is the same girl that he saw with this ballerina puppet. And so he's like, hey, I don't know if I can trust you or not. I think I can trust Sabina, but I don't know if I can trust you. So we have Sabina trying to talk to Pinocchio, convincing him to get out of here. And then we have Stromboli who's like, hey, what's going on? So Pinocchio is to finally have Jiminy get released from this bottle he was under, because a rock ends up hitting his jar. And so Jiminy finds where Pinocchio is, and we have a moment where Pinocchio is starting to lie in this cage, and he realizes that his nose is growing longer. And so we have Jiminy right on Pinocchio's nose, and it seems that the more and more Pinocchio is lying, the more we start to realize that this could help Pinocchio get him free from this cage by having him lie to get to this key. So Jiminy is getting close to the key, but not close enough, so Pinocchio needs to continue to lie. So Jiminy gets the cage open with the use of this key, and so they scramble out of there. And so what happens later on in the film is we find out that Stromboli ended up getting arrested, and now Fabiana and Sabina can go on to do their own puppeteer business without the threat of being under lock and key again. And so at some point they re-meet up with Pinocchio to ask him, hey, like, do you want to go on and like join our company and like go on the road with us? And Pinocchio's like, maybe I'll meet you guys again at some point, but like I would rather focus on getting back to my father, or like I would rather focus on other things. So so that ends up being like just a part of the film at some point. So Pinocchio ends up going and getting free from Stromboli, but we then have Pinocchio that meets up with this coachman who is to have a number of kids with him that is to tell Pinocchio about Pleasant Island, and is to convince him like how much or how great this place really is. And so Pinocchio is like, well, I think I can kind of go on here. Like this sounds like a nice place. So when Pinocchio goes on to further venture into Pleasant Island with a kid who, of course, is to be called Lampwick, we have, of course, Pinocchio, who is realizing that he's seeing all these kids eat to absurdity, and like Pinocchio is starting getting like really like sick or gag reflex. Pinocchio is having these big mugs of root beer right in front of him that technically look like beer. And so we have Lampwick, who is loving every minute of this Pleasant Island showcase, as we again have the coachman, who is Luke Evans, showing up as this guy who's just handing these kids more root beer for them to enjoy the journey of them seeing kids playing with fireworks, breaking and crashing clocks and household items, and doing all of these like absurd things that are technically to be morally wrong. And so Pinocchio is desperately wanting for Jiminy to come back to him to help guide him here what he should be doing. And so we have Pinocchio and Lampwick who are playing pool, and while this is happening, we all of a sudden start to have Lampwick that is slowly but surely starting to turn into a donkey, to the point where he can no longer talk to Pinocchio. He's kind of bashing around, and come to find out, when Pinocchio leaves this establishment that looks like a bar to me, it looks like a Western saloon, we have Pinocchio realizing that there's a huge mass cluster of these crates that are all crating away these donkeys who were these kids. And we have the coachman, and we have the coach's or the coachman's assistants, who are just these kind of these black shadowy looking figures. It was very bizarre. And we have them going on to wrangling up all these donkey slash kids to be caged away, and is to spot Pinocchio, who is to now have donkey ears and a tail, starting to run away. So Pinocchio gets away from the coachman and his assistants to then go off to find Jiminy and make his way home to find out that his father is now gone. That it seems that Geppetto was to sell all of his clocks to then desperately try to find his son. And weirdly, Geppetto decided to go on a journey on a boat to find his son, because I guess he figured his son was in the water somewhere. So Pinocchio is to now be like, well, like, I'm gonna need to go onto the same journey as my dad, so what should I do? And we immediately have like Jiminy, who's like, well, like, Pinocchio, you're technically just a piece of wood, right? Technically. And we do have this bird here, so maybe the bird can grab us and like fly us to where your dad is. And Sophia is like, wait a minute, no, like, this puppet is far too heavy. Like, I'm not going to be able to just fly you guys to where your father is. No, it doesn't work that way. So instead, we just have this bird that is like flying as quickly as it can, like holding this rope in its beak, and is dragging Pinocchio through the water as if he is to be like water skiing. So we have Pinocchio water skiing through the water, and we finally have Sophia, who is telling like the two characters that, hey, I see Geppetto, he's over there, and they're like, what? Like, she mumbled some kind of something. So come to find out, they find out where Geppetto is, and so they're like, great, let's reunite. And all of a sudden, we then have both Pinocchio and Geppetto, who ends up getting swallowed by a monstro whale. So, and Jiminy ends up getting forced on the outside of this whalish monster where he's smacking at the teeth, like, hey, release my friend. So we then go on to have Pinocchio that is swimming around in this water, and he finds Geppetto, and we now find that like Geppetto is on this like massive ship. And so when the two of them reunite, we have Geppetto that tosses this log with this rope on it to Pinocchio and smacks him. It's like, oh, I just hurt my son, and that was kind of funny. So Geppetto reunites with Pinocchio, and they're like, well, like, I don't know how we're gonna get out of here. I don't think that the mouth of this whale is ever really gonna open, and I think we're just getting digested. So they come up with the idea of like, well, hey, like, there's fire in that lantern, right? And it's like, well, yeah. Like, how about we go on and we figure out a way to light the mouth of this whale like a lot more, to at some point that it is to force this whale to surface because he's choking on smoke. So all of a sudden we have this massive fire that is going on in this whale's mouth to forcefully have this whale open its mouth, and Geppetto and Pinocchio make a run for it, as we have Pinocchio and Geppetto that is now on this smaller boat, and we have the Sonic moment where Pinocchio is using its legs to swim like crazy. So we have the whale that is massively trying to chase down Pinocchio and Geppetto, and it gets to the point where Pinocchio is trying to swim as quickly as humanly possible, and so we get to where both Pinocchio and Geppetto are to make their way into this cave, which finally has the whale finally like relent, like, okay, I can't get like to Geppetto or Pinocchio now, like, I guess I'm just like not gonna get to them. So we finally have them realize that they are finally saved, that they're finally out of there, and so Geppetto now is to finally accept that his son is forever going to just be a puppet, and Geppetto is completely fine with that, and he just accepts Pinocchio for who he is, and he loves him, and Pinocchio ends up saying it back, having this aw kind of moment. So, oddly, by the end of this movie, they realize that there is some light in some tunnel that they both head into, and that helps them to get back to where they need to be to get home. And so that leads these characters to go back to being happily ever after, and so on and so forth. So, with that said, I think I'm just going to wrap this movie up here, because that's really, for the most part, when it's happening for the Pinocchio film. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything that I forgot about, because I'm sure there's a billion things that I did. A lot of people could have their own opinions about this film. A lot of people will probably say the very exact opposite of what I said, because that always happens. Because people have their own opinions, and I do appreciate that. And some people are to also say that the animated movie Pinocchio was their favorite animated movie as a child, so of course they loved this live action version, regardless of what anybody say, yada yada yada. So there always is that. So with that said, I'm just gonna get out of here so I can go on and put this video out for the day. So goodbye everybody. Goodbye everybody.